This is funny. Hi, this is a willingness to pay for hemp textiles, a cross-national pilot by myself, Ellen, who's actually online from the University of Alberta, and Patricia Dolan, who's also at the University of Alberta. This stems from work that we did during my Fulbright as some kind of food chair at the University of Alberta, and the Gund Institute at the University of Vermont, and of course partnering with the University of Vermont and the University of Alberta. So the study, our objective was to determine quality characteristic preferences of US and Canadian consumers for emerging hemp product applications. And this was focused on textiles or hemp fiber, not CBD hemp. For each product, we included an environmental, a performance, and a certification characteristic. So this was national discrete choice experiments in Canada and the US. So these were national samples. This project forms preliminary data for several other proposals and analyses that we're proposing. And the project is part of a larger hemp initiative that involves so many people and so many universities, etc. So this is truly hot off the presses. The US data were just collected last month. So like really hot off the presses. So 2 simultaneous online surveys were undertaken within Canada in March of 2022. And what I mean by simultaneous, one was looking at hemp jeans or pants, and one was looking at hemp bed linens. 2 simultaneous online surveys were undertaken within the US just last month with stated preferences again for jeans and bed linens. So 2 separate samples. We analyzed 2,200 of the Canadian surveys and 2,000 of the US surveys. And of course, our results are hot off the press. So here's just a word cloud of what the Canadian sample said when they said, what's the first thing you think of when you think of hemp, compared to the US sample for jeans. So whereas the Canadian said natural, plant, sustainable, and drugs are there but hidden, in the US, cannabis, marijuana, weed, which is really, I think, a barrier to expanding the US market for hemp. And here's what was said for the sheets example. Again, marijuana, weed, plant, and natural rope product, plant, clothing, etc. for the Canadian. It's just a way to visualize what people think about when you say the word hemp. And indeed, we are talking about non-psychotropic cannabis sativa. So this is less than 0.3%, grown since 2018 under the US Farm Bill, but really started in 2014 in several states, of which Vermont was one of the first. And Canada's 25 years ahead of the US in terms of legalization and production of hemp. And most of the Canadian hemp is grown for seed or grain. We call it hemp grain, not hemp seeds. And as you know, most of the US hemp has been grown for CBD, and that ship has sailed. So here we have lots of results in a little bit of space. So here on this side, you have the gene sample for the US and Canada, and here you have the bed sheets and linens for the US and Canada. Now note that this only contains the characteristics. We're not anywhere near including interaction effects or any of the demographics or any of the attitudinal questions, which in themselves are going to be very interesting to look at. So these are only the quality characteristics. And in the US, here we go, genes, the premium for willing to pay for sustainable hemp. That means hemp with a label, not just hemp. They just were made out of hemp. The label is sustainable hemp, of which there's about a $25 premium, and sustainable cotton about a $20 premium. And then we had breathability, wicking, heat generation. You don't want to be hot in your jeans, stretch, and willing to pay for softness. And what's interesting is most of these are significant, except for heat in the US and just hemp regular. Like hemp is not a characteristic without something else to go with it. And in Canada, we see the premiums are about the same. But you have to understand that the Canadian dollar is worth a little bit different, and the price points that we started with were a little bit different. And then we have our bed linens, and we see that, again, the sustainable hemp in the United States and sustainable cotton, that sustainability certification, it seems to be really a really important driver of willingness to pay. And the same thing for the Canadian market. So here we can compare the willingness to pay over cotton jeans expressed as a percentage of the average price used in the experiment because of the differences in the exchange rate and so on. And you can see that the Canadians are, they like that hemp only characteristic much more than the US, whereas in the US, we have the certifications are important. Breathability, weight gain, and heat transmission and softness, they're the opposite. We don't want heat transmission, and I haven't figured this one out. I like crisp pants and crisp sheets, and I guess some other people like, you know, the higher thread count in sheets makes them softer or silkier. So I haven't figured that one out. And then here we have the results for sheets, and although the last one was for jeans, you can see the same results in terms of the hemp characteristics in the hemp characteristic in Canada by itself is important, but in the US, it has to be certified. So that certification of sustainability, or ECO, is going to be very, very important. So what's next? Next, we hope to include demographics in the Logit models. We will include consumer attitudes and perceptions about sustainability and individual consumers' responsibility towards keeping our planet sustainable and resilient. We will include and exclude by our validity check. We'll include the entire Canadian sample, although I think we did. And we're going to get more money because none of this is cheap. We did it on the fly, but we managed to get 2 national samples of over 2,000 in each country, which I thought was pretty incredible, given we didn't have any money to do this. Thank you. We do have time for questions. And Ellen is there to answer any questions that I can't. Any questions? Yes.
I'm sorry, this is like ignorant, but like, how did you define sustainability? Is there like a standardized label and
yeah, that's a really, really good question. And again, this is just tip of the iceberg, but we used several scales that are in the literature to ask the sustainability perception questions. So it's backed up by literature. And then there was an eco label, not the eco label that is available already in the marketplace, because when you would, if you were to include that in an experiment or something that you show consumers, some of those consumers have already seen that label and some of them haven't. So these were created labels, sort of created for the experiment. Yeah. Anyone else? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for the Dr. Kolondeski for the great presentation. So the next speaker is Dr. Carla Gravitas.
Okay. Oh, I didn't share.
Oh, it's sure.
Is it?
Sure.
Is that automatically ours?
I think so.
Brandon, can you see the presentation? Oh.
I can't now. I could.
She gets my extra minute.
Sure.
Can you see it now?
Yep.
Great. Thanks, Shijun. Welcome, everybody, to my presentation, Consumer Preferences for Country of Origin Labeling on Beef, Insights from Japan. And this work is joint work together with Koichi Yonezawa, Karen DeLong, and Shijun Gao. Beef is a major source of protein in Japan. The typical Japanese consumer eats 103 grams of meat per day, and that is meat in general, not just beef. Compared to that, fish only 64 grams. And overall, meat consumption has increased by 24% in the past 10 years, whereas fish actually has decreased by 14%. Beef ranks third after pork and chicken, where the typical Japanese consumer eats 41 grams of pork, 32 grams of chicken, and 15 grams of beef per day. So where does the beef in Japan come from? 35% of the beef consumed is domestically produced, 33% is from Australia, and 27% is from the US. And we do see a huge opportunity for US beef in Japan because the beef consumption has increased by 12% in the past 5 years, whereas the Australian beef has decreased. It is still the top imported beef, but due to drought, the amount that they export has decreased. Also, we have seen a price cut due to the United States-Japan trade agreement. The tax has been decreased to 25.8%. So the question is, where is our opportunity? How should we promote US beef? Should it be through quality, through safety, or other promotional activities? And that leads to our research questions. What is Japanese consumers' willingness to pay for US beef? How do they value quality labels or quality grades? And does US beef, when it's carrying a quality grade, lead to a higher willingness to pay? To answer these questions, we conducted an online choice experiment in Japan this spring. And our participants were beef consumers from major cities in Japan. We had a sample size of 654. We programmed our survey in Qualtrics, and Qualtrics also collected our data. The product that we tested was thinly sliced chuck eye roll, and the experimental design that we used was an efficient design with 3 blocks and 12 choice sets in each block. We had 3 alternatives plus the opt-out. The attributes that we tested was the price with 3 levels, country of origin. We used Japan, US, and Australia. And then we included a quality grade that was either present or absent. And as you can see, that was country specific. So when the beef originated in the US, we would use, for example, the certified Angus. We also included a production label, a no growth hormones administered label that was either absent or present. Here are some examples of our choice set. So you can see we have the 3 alternatives, and then the participants could also check the box, none of these. And here it's a little bit bigger. So you can see, for example, we have the 100 gram price, but this package represents a 200 gram amount. So then we also had that price. Here would be true Aussie when it was Australia, or the Wagyu when it was Japan. And over here, that would be our production label. And here are some preliminary results from mixed logit models. You can see that the price is significant and negative. That was expected. So the higher the price, the less likely they were to choose that, that alternative. Australia and US as country of origin is significant and negative compared to Japan. So the domestic beef is preferred. The no growth hormones label is preferred. It's significant and positive, and so is the quality grade. And then we can see that also all the standard deviations are highly significant. So there is some preference heterogeneity for all these parameters. We also ran a model where we specified the quality grades, and again, the results are very stable in terms of significance and magnitude. We see that the specific quality grades are also highly significant and positive, with the Angus certified being a little bit higher than the true Aussie. When we translate that into willingness to pay, we can see that willingness to pay for Australia is lower than for the US. Both are discounted here. The no growth hormones label has the highest premium, and the quality grade is also positive, but in comparison, the premium they are willing to pay for the no growth hormones label is much higher. Looking at the specific quality grades, we see that the Angus has a little bit higher willingness to pay than the true Aussie label. In this model now, willingness to pay for US beef is slightly lower than for Australian beef. And again, the no growth hormone administered label has a positive willingness to pay, has the highest premium. So to conclude that, the domestic beef is preferred, but when imported beef is graded as a premium quality, that does improve the willingness to pay, which for us right now is one of the key results, because many studies show that the imported beef, no matter, or in general imported foods, are discounted compared to domestic products, but when we use quality labels, then we can increase the willingness to pay for our products. And the production label receives the highest willingness to pay, which is also important to know, given that we not always in the US have the no growth hormones administered beef. So if you want to export to Japan, focusing on that could be important. And just a shout out to our team. This is part of our USDA grant strengthening US beef export markets. And you can see we had a lot of people working with us on that from our own experience. Conducting research in Japan was not that easy when you can't even read anything that's on the packages. Koichi was really the driving force here, and his mother, thank you, who took a lot of pictures for us to understand how should even the pictures of the packages look, right? Because in the US, it looks so different. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you so much. Any questions?
So Carola, you also said that this was preliminary. I missed the date, but you just did this.
As yours, hot off the press. I mean, we ran those models 3 days ago or so. We collected the data March, April. So yeah, we did a lot of testing here with the choice experiments. I think we ran in total, Shijun, what, probably three or four pre-tests. So first smaller pre-tests, and then we had a 100 participant pre-test in Japan, because we were just not sure with like how should the packages look, how should the beef look, the labels. It's like when you can, like we use, I mean, that's totally me doing these packages, not, right? We have a designer, and then there was like an error in the symbol, and then he had to redo all the packages because it's so tricky, but very interesting. And the results, like Shijun will present. Are you presenting from the Mexico survey?
Because we launched a survey in Mexico, China, Japan, UK, and Germany, like all at once. And they're not all the same, because obviously we consume each of those countries looks completely different. So we launched them like all at the same time. So
yeah, but they all kind of include specific quality grades, and then they all have different attributes, but we do find that the quality grades across the countries really matter.
Yeah, there are definitely a few very utilized and preferred by the consumers.
Yeah, and that I found that really interesting to see. Like, we know willingness to pay is kind of negative for the foreign products, but if you have a quality grade, no matter really what the other attributes, what country you're in, like you can really boost the premium for your product.
Even in countries that are just starting to consume a lot of beef, like China, they really have a big emphasis on the quality grade. We expected in Japan that we need beef a long time, we have like beer and all that sort of stuff, but we also saw those results in Mexico and China too.
Could there be an impact of language? Because I'm wondering, like, was the production quality one in English?
Oh, it's in Japan. It's that.
And same for the quality. Was the quality, because that one looked like that was in English, like certified Angus beef.
And then it has the Japanese here. Yeah, that is. So the true.
That label will appear on some Japanese beef. So in the grocery store, that certified Angus beef will be on it.
Yeah, so all of these are market labels currently, and
Aussie beef is a big one in Japan.
yeah, like, so it does have the Japanese translation. That wasn't us. That is how you currently find it in Japan in the market.
So those are redundant, Aussie beef and from Australia. Those are, talk to me about that.
Yeah, that is, so since not every package would have that, right? So you may have a package that is not quality certified, like here or there, I don't know, do we have So it would
So
be,
so we can compare it when it has both and see if it is redundant.
yeah.
Or versus if it only has had one or the other, because some of them might not have a country.
And what might be
That's something to
redundant
look at
is,
too.
yeah, to call out the country, but we wanted to be consistent because we did the different countries, so.
Maybe one thing we could do is just have an interaction term between the grade and the country to see whether that is country specific, right?
Did we include that in the design?
Yeah, like for the Japanese one, we did a special design where like True Aussie can only appear on the.
Yeah, I would have to check the design because we
It is
test,
slightly different for all the countries because they all just follow slightly
But if
different.
you have an efficient design, right? If you have an efficient design, I think you can do that.
Yeah.
Always try to see whether.
We have some interaction models.
we do have an interaction model. I just have to check
We
which,
do in China have an interaction model.
oh, definitely.
That interacts
Yeah.
with the poly label and whichever specific country.
I have to check that because there were like, with all the countries, it was a bit challenging, but yeah, definitely good comment to see how that changes. And I think we want to tease out more like what changes with the, like this model where you really
That
take it
interaction
out.
term can tell you whether the quality is associated with the country.
Yeah.
This is the iceberg, right? You just.
Yes.
Oh,
It's a massive project. We spent a year like talking to the US Meat Export Federation and USDA attaches in each country, people we knew on the ground, like actually making sure this is exactly how the packages work and look. And these are the symbols that the consumers find most important in those countries and we pretest.
yeah.
We did a lot of prep.
But I think I'm over time here. Thank you so much. Next speaker.
So he didn't cut you off.
We kept them distracted.
So next one comes, the next speaker is Maroon.
Yeah.
So, hello everyone, I'm Maria Misak and I'll be presenting, here it is.
I think it needs to share the screen.
Okay. Sure.
We're still sharing, I think.
Yeah, I think we,
No, I don't see it. There it is.
okay. So the topic that I'll be presenting the research is consumer preferences for carbon-friendly labeled beef. And other co-authors and assisters were Dr. Carola Grabitis and Dr. Deepti Koladi and Dr. Eva Vandersloos. So the motivation behind this research is that livestock contributes 65% of agricultural greenhouse gas emissions. And one of the ways to mitigate this is through prescribed or rotational grazing. And prescribed or rotational grazing basically allows to sequester carbon, and it has other benefits as well, as it allows plants to recover, deepens root system, improves soil health, water infiltration. So, how to basically incentivize both producers and consumers to adopt this technique. So I'm working on the consumer side and seeing how we can incentivize more beef producers. And to that effect, we saw that price premium for beef produced using prescribed grazing has the potential to be labeled as raised carbon friendly. And other labels that we wanted to test with it was animal welfare label and blockchain traceability. Blockchain traceability is something that allows farm to fork traceability of all the supply chain partners and the attributes that they exhibit. We also studied and researched consumers' beliefs and perceptions about climate change and greenhouse gas emissions, and whether they have a profound impact on purchasing and consumption decisions, and whether providing information to part of the sample would have an effect on their behavior and willingness to pay estimates. So the objectives of our research was to ascertain consumers' willingness to pay for raised carbon friendly beef, which is based on rotational grazing, and to determine how information provision, particularly relevant information regarding greenhouse gas emissions from beef production, and the role of prescribed grazing in mitigating greenhouse gas emissions would influence US consumers' willingness to pay for the label, and to gauge how belief about beef production's contribution towards greenhouse emissions would affect willingness to pay estimate. To meet these objectives, we designed a discrete choice experiment with the ribeye beef steak as our study product. We used D-efficient design to make 4 blocks of 10 choice sets each with 2 alternatives and an opt-out option. And before the discrete choice experiment, the respondents were basically shown definitions of the labels regarding raised carbon friendly particularly, and blockchain traceability. So this was a split sample design with control and information treatment. There were 430 respondents in control treatment and 430 respondents in the information treatment. And here we can see that there were 4 price levels, and the environmental label being raised carbon friendly and none being the base, and animal welfare label that was used was humanely raised, and traceability was blockchain traceability or no label at all. This is one of the sample choice sets that was displayed to the respondents. So basically the target population was US population who were 18 years or older primary shoppers who purchased and consumed meat. And Qualtrics was used to conduct this survey in September 2021. And the belief parameter that we wanted to gauge was through a Likert scale question of, do you believe beef production is contributing to greenhouse gas emissions? And we had a Likert scale from 1 to 7, with 1 being strongly disbelieved to 7 being strongly believed, and neutral being the level 4, where they believed that they were neutral believers. And so the data was analyzed basically at 2 levels. First, at the control and the information level, where they were provided relevant information regarding rotational grazing and greenhouse gas emissions by livestock sector. And then at the next level, there were subsamples where control and information both were divided into non-believers, neutral believers, and believers based on the Likert question that I mentioned. And then the same with information. Here we can see that the neutral and the believers were basically a major chunk of the survey respondents, both in control and information. We used RPL error component to analyze our data, and we also did pooled data interaction, treatment interaction to basically confirm that information did have an impact on willingness to pay and utility estimates and utility coefficients. And the subsamples were also studied using RPL error component, where price was the fixed variable, whereas the other labels were random. Coming to the results, this is like the estimates of RPL error component of control and information treatment. Price having a negative and significant value is pretty much understood. And then from raised carbon friendly, we can see that the control and information displays significant result at 1%. And the information treatment shows much higher utility coefficient as compared to the control treatment. Humanely raised and blockchain traceability were also significant at 1%. And the high standard deviation displayed heterogeneity amongst preferences in the sample. To confirm that information treatment did have an effect. These are the willingness to pay estimates for beef attributes. Again, we can see that information treatment displays a higher willingness to pay estimate for raised carbon friendly beef. And then here we have the pooled data analysis, where we had an information treatment interaction dummy that was interacted with the labels. And we can see that raised carbon friendly particularly is significant at 10%, whereas humanly raised and blockchain traceability weren't. Obviously, they weren't even shown, information regarding that. These are the utility preferences from RPL error component for the subclasses of believers, non-believers, and neutral believers. So in particular, we can see that disbelievers and neutral believers had insignificant, utility preferences, whereas believers had a high and significant utility preference at 1%. The same goes for humanly raised and blockchain traceability. We can see that there is a general progression from disbelievers to believers. And here, if we see the results from the information treatment of the subclasses, we can see that the disbelievers still show insignificant results. However, the neutral believers seem to be affected by that information tremendously. And rather than showing, like in the control treatment, they were showing insignificant results, and now they're showing significant results for neutral and believers. So these are the willingness to pay estimates. Again, the willingness to pay estimates also display significant results in the information treatment. So the conclusion from this is that especially when climate smart commodities are being marketed, so this research provides policy insights for marketers for relevant information that could help in improving a willingness to pay estimates for labels that are raised carbon friendly, for instance, and blockchain traceability. Thank you.
Still have room for the one question.
Yeah.
I was wondering, so if I'm a stakeholder thinking about doing this, I'm wondering, are the people who are willing to pay for that attribute infrequent purchasers of this product? Like, am I going to win over not that great of customers versus are the people who are not swayed by this information, are they more frequent consumers of beef? Does that make sense? Like,
yeah, I understand what you're trying to say, but we did not study in these were consumers and purchasers of meat. How frequent that we'll have to look into, because we did have a question in the survey regarding that.
I think you need to do that because
Yeah.
you look at the willingness to pay,
Yeah.
addition times their frequency, for example, and try to see how much are producers really going to gain going after that particular group of
Yeah.
consumers.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I will give one short note. So you have a couple of slides where you explain differences between treatments using coefficients from the models. I would suggest you, if you have a paper, to avoid that, because reviewers may say, yes, you're explaining differences, but differences can be driven by difference in scale.
Mm-hmm.
And not necessarily difference in preferences, right? So I would suggest you to just focus
Okay.
on willingness to pay estimates, which are ratios, right? That
Yeah.
cancel out eventually
Yeah.
difference in scale.
Yeah.
In a way that you don't get this comment, because some reviewers are very
Particular about
sensitive
it.
to
Yeah.
this.
Do you mean, Chandu, that my scale, my 5 is different from your 5? Is that
Not
what
only
you mean?
mine, it's
No,
that,
I mean,
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
just
yeah.
using that as.
Yeah,
an
yeah,
example
so you have the
versus-
control and you have the treatment, right? All the coefficients you have in those tables have a delta involved in all of the data, right? Beta is multiplied by something you don't see there, but it's there. And so in the control and in the treatment group, that value is different. So if you have a coefficient of 1.5 in the control and 1.7 in the treatment, you don't know whether it's because I like whatever is in the treatment more, or it's because the delta, right?
Yeah.
And so we just focus on willingness to pay values.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, that's very relevant.
Okay, so the next presenter is Nick Rose for the moment.
Great to be here at a packed house. Feel free to take my seat there if you'd like for just a moment.
I was in this room earlier and they said it's a safety issue, they want added portraits. But being more students, yeah, it's actually not a safety. I guess it's like a guide thing, so like get out there. We had like a.
It's good for our health to stand up.
Now that you poured that out, let us switch, isn't it?
And speaking of your health, it's great to be here today, sharing some of my dissertation research about defining and labeling foods healthy. This is part of my dissertation research I'm doing at University of Vermont with Jane Kolodinsky. And it's a very timely topic as the FDA is actually considering updating both the criteria for labeling food healthy, as well as a potential logo that might go on products that would carry such a label. So the FDA acknowledges that the healthy definition is quite out of date. It's currently based on total fat, saturated fat, cholesterol, sodium, and the presence of vitamins and minerals. It doesn't include a variety of other nutrients, including added sugar, doesn't include the level of food processing, whether it has whole food ingredients or production practices. And just as an example of that, both 100% orange juice and Sunny D are both healthy according to the current criteria. They both provide a good source of vitamin C. They don't have any fat, saturated fat, or cholesterol. So I think that's kind of an illustrative example of the need to kind of update the criteria behind the FDA's healthy claim. So for this project, we are looking at US consumer preferences for healthy foods, whether consumers want a healthy food label on a product, and if so, what criteria should be used to define healthy foods. And we're looking specifically at both nutrient criteria, so fat, cholesterol, sugar, and we're also looking at non-nutrient criteria. And that was specifically a question that the FDA asked when they put out the request for comments from the public in the Federal Register in 2016. They specifically wanted to know, should this term be defined solely based on a food's nutrient content, or if it should include some additional criteria. So I'm not going to spend too much time on the methods here. We are looking at 1,100 public comments that were submitted from a variety of stakeholders, primarily in the US, through the Federal Register directly to the FDA in response to this request for comment on healthy labeling. And so while looking at those 1,100 comments, we noticed that 872, so about 85% of them, did provide some specific criteria for labeling foods healthy. And as you can see, not surprisingly, nutrients were some of the most commonly reported criteria. So we coded each comment with all of the potential criteria that might have been included within each individual comment. So for example, 62% of the comments mentioned something like sugar or sodium content. So for example, a disqualifying amount for added sugar in foods. For fats and oils, some people may have talked about the total quantity of fat. Some might have talked about the quality or the types of fats. Other nutrients could have been vitamins, proteins, or calories. We also identified a few additional categories, as you can see here, that have to do with the level of processing. So including the types of ingredients. Many people commented on specific industrial ingredients that should not be allowed to be labeled as healthy. So some examples here are corn syrup, corn sweetener, etc. Many people talked about processing. Processing wasn't very clearly defined. People often use words like minimal processing or as little as processing as possible, but this was a theme that we found frequently throughout the comments. And then also we noticed people talking about this idea of eating more whole foods, kind of similar to processing, but that healthy foods are closer to their whole, unprocessed, simpler food. Of course, those types of foods probably don't have a lot of food labels on it. So that's maybe not as relevant, but it's an interesting concept. And when people are talking about healthy foods, they think about these aspects. Also, it's kind of surprising, you can't quite see that there, that about a quarter of the comments also talked about food production practices. So they might have talked about antibiotics, use of pesticides, chemicals, that type of thing, GMOs, and organic production practices. This I find particularly interesting when we look at those. Here we can see, some comments obviously had multiple criteria that they included within each comment. Next, we looked at those who mentioned only nutrients versus those who may have listed additional criteria. And so as you can see here, about a third of the comments think that healthy should be defined entirely based on nutrients, so fat, sugar, sodium, etc. And the majority, 2/3 of the comments, we're calling nutrients plus. People who think that yes, nutrients are important, but there's other criteria that are additionally important, such as the ingredients, whether it has industrial ingredients like artificial sweeteners, whether it has actually real food in it, whether it's organic, production practices, and then that concept of being minimally processed. So in summary, only a third of the comments thought that healthy should be based entirely on nutrients. And within that, sugar, added sugar and sodium were kind of some of the most commonly reported criteria. And that is in line with the current dietary guidelines for Americans. However, as I just pointed out, the majority of the comments believed that additional criteria should also be incorporated into the healthy criteria. So maybe looking at the quality of the ingredients, the presence of whole food, the level of processing. Interestingly, these additional characteristics, many of these are kind of connected to this concept of ultra-processed food, which is a growing category of food consumption in the US and around the world, that some nutrition professionals are recommending that we maybe try to reduce our consumption of ultra-processed foods. And I believe that the results here suggest that food consumers in the US would be receptive to information about the level of food processing, in addition to traditional nutrient declarations. As it says here, you might not be able to read this, but some of the limitations here are the generalizability of the data set. We're using public comments here, so it's not a representative sample. Also, the age of the data, I didn't mention that, but these comments were 2016 and 2017. So I am currently working on phase 2 of this project, where we are using survey data from the state of Vermont, which is we have a representative sample. And so the blue here are the proportion of the comments that we just looked at that mentioned this criteria of sugar, fat, processing, et cetera. We asked a similar question in the Vermonter poll, and we found kind of similar trends here, where kind of added sugar and sodium are kind of similarly the top priority. The green bars here represent the Vermonter poll, and interesting, this was 5 years later, and we do actually see maybe more interest in processing, more interest in ingredients and farming practices, and also more interest in this kind of NFP plus concept. So I think that's my last slide there, and I think I'm just about out of time. So here's one more word cloud for you to look at. Of those 1,100 comments, here are some of the most frequently mentioned words that we noticed there. Hey.
How did you handle, did you get duplicate comments from individuals, like sent in by a single individual, but like a form email or?
So I didn't notice duplicate comments by one individual, but we did find, chain letters, I guess you could say. And so we were able to identify those, and we would keep one comment in the data set and then remove the duplicates, so that we were able to kind of see each comment was basically kind of one, so we were able to kind of remove the duplicates.
I would be interested to see including the duplicates as well.
Yeah, and we have that information, so we can kind of present it, both ways.
Because obviously they sent it in because they believe it.
Mm-hmm. Right, so it's kind of like, do we want to see the total number of ideas that are out there, or do we want to see, the proportion of the comments that are, aligning with each one of those? So.
Yeah, I took the public comments on a labeling line. There were a lot of chain letters.
Yes, yeah. We were able to identify those. We got all this into an Excel file and then use the ABC sort to kind of identify those. So yeah. My question?
Just a quick question. I was wondering, how did you decide on the different categories of the comments?
Oh, that's a great question. So this it kind of emerged while reviewing the comments. So we had a more qualitative approach to reviewing these. However, while looking at it, you may notice I did include these kind of broader categories of level of processing, connection to ultra processed foods. So while reviewing, so the criteria there, those kind of emerged while we were reviewing those, but then we kind of created those larger categories to reflect what we were seeing in the comments. So.
And you don't have any information on the background characteristics of those people?
Unfortunately, no, we don't. There was 80% of the comments came in as like a simple comment where someone just pasted it in the kind of text box there. About 20% of the comments were submitted as an attachment. And from that, we do actually have affiliation. So we do have like whether it was a consumer or food industry. And so that we can go a little bit further, but again, that's only kind of like a subset. The rest of them, yeah, we really don't know a lot about who these people are. So that's certainly a limitation. So
I don't know if it's a limitation, because I wouldn't maybe submit a public comment to the Federal Register if I had to answer all those demographic questions. So
that's a good question. Yeah.
No, I didn't say it was a
limitation. I was just curious.
Yeah. Sean, did you have a question? Yeah.
Well, coming back to the earlier question about the chain mails that people submit, did you do any poking around? Do you have any sense of the source of some of the campaigns that might have led to some of those cut and paste or cut paste and add?
That would be an interesting thing to kind of track. I haven't really spent a lot of time kind of looking at the chains in terms of like, yeah, what was the source of those and like maybe how many were in each different category, but that would be another interesting kind of thing to look into. So yeah, thanks. It's probably like NGOs, I'm guessing, like Consumers Union and groups like that. Yeah.
Are you working with anybody within the FDA that's actually looking at these? And this is kind of how they sort it?
Not currently, yeah. Although I just got an email from someone from the FDA today who's here, but wasn't able to come into the presentation. So yeah, so I'm excited for some of the implications of. I would love to see that as well. Yeah, yeah. I'm actually giving another presentation later today about another docket, and yeah, and so yeah, my sense is they don't really use the use it too.
Well, when they update an NPR now, they will usually summarize in the Federal Register something about if and how they responded to input, but
right.
I've always
yeah.
thought it's probably self-confirming here, but we're going to change.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, assertion there. Yeah. It is a lot of fun. You can see a lot. There are some fun comments in there as well. So if you don't mind a little language, you know, people. Some people use drop some F-bombs and etc. So, oh yeah. There's so many different ways they can be spelled, I guess. You know. Yeah.
That's more data. This
Yeah.
brain.
Yeah.
Right?
That's right. Yeah, it amplifies the level of concern.
Rating scale 1 to 5.
Oh, okay. Thank you for the.
Thank you.
So let's welcome the best presenter, Dr. Christina Caputo from the Michigan State University.
Okay. Each time you start a new share and share just the, like when you share the full screen, because I think we sometimes lose the new presentation.
Yeah, just share this.
Yeah, right. Brandon, do you see it?
Yep, looks great.
Okay, so hello everyone. I'm Vincenzina Caputo from Michigan State University. This is not a full paper, it's just a working paper. We are in the process of collecting some new data. And this project has been funded by the USDA NIFA AFRI within the markets and trade research area. And here what we're trying to do is to use some behavioral economics theory, which is known as cultural recognition theory, to better understand consumer acceptance of new food technologies. And we consider gene editing as one example of new food technology. So this is just an outline. First, try, as I said, you know, we don't have a full paper, so I should say something today here. So I will just try to motivate the study and then present the experimental design. And finally, you know, I hope I will get some comments from you to then start the final steps, which consist of data collection and analysis and eventually, and hopefully a paper. So what is the motivation, right? The main motivation is how people view new food technologies, and in particular, as I said before, gene editing. Now, why gene editing? So many people define gene editing, especially in our profession, as the second generation of new food technologies. And they do so because the way the technology works is pretty different, or different from the first generation of genetic modifications, such as, for example, GMO. So unlike GMO, what basically the technology does is edits particular DNAs of any food item. And by doing so, they can achieve some sort of benefits that can be relevant within the agricultural sector, and in this case, within the food production space. In other words, this technology is used to improve the quality of the food we eat, and it does so by achieving those goals in a more efficient way, both in terms of time, space, and money, meaning, the type of investments that are needed to achieve those goals. There are a range of applications that have been already developed within the agriculture and food space. And most of those applications are justified by saying, well, we use this new food technology because we want to provide some benefits to consumers. Or, well, there is a big discussion about how to achieve environmental goals. Most of the time, those environmental goals cannot be achieved through our individual behaviors. So we use these new food technologies to do so. And so one of the reasons is to improve the environmental status of our, our world. Other applications include animal welfare concerns. So there are food production and especially animal-based food products are produced following certain type of procedures, which are considered not to be that relevant in terms of respecting animals. And so there have been a lot of applications within the animal production space. And finally, one of the main reasons of the use of these new food technologies is because we want to achieve economic goals. Farmers can reduce the production cost, and so consumers can pay lower prices. Here are two main examples that we may all know. The first one is the use of gene editing to, on cows to be hornless. We have a paper with Valerie Kilders in Journal of Agricultural Economics explaining how people see this technology and how they view the use of this technology to improve animal welfare standards. But there are also other applications which are more targeted to improve quality features of what we eat. For example, we have this gene-edited lettuce to be non-browning, and we have in this regard, a report funded by the Food Industry Association, where we looked specifically at this application to see whether people will value these products and how much they will value lettuce products to be non-browning. Obviously, those applications, as I said before, they solve animal welfare issues, but also try, for example, to reduce food waste, in addition to create benefits for the consumers, right, in terms of long shelf lives. Okay, so here is some, despite all of those benefits, the acceptability of this technology remains low, very close to the first generation of GMO products. We did this report for the Food Industry Association last year, where we evaluated how people would value gene-edited products compared to the first generation of genetically modified food, which are now known here in the States as bioengineered food, and there is a new label, but also compared to organic and non-GMO. And we use this setup because basically when you go to the supermarket, you see all of those different options. You just don't see gene-edited versus non. But you see a range of products and you will pick one of those. So bottom line, the consumer acceptance is very low. And so now the next question for scientists is, okay, what should we do to increase it? And why is that so low? So let's try to answer the first question, right? Why is that low? And one of the reasons is because we have poor knowledge about how the technology works. Basically, we don't know what it is and how it works. And so then when we went to the Food Industry Association, we had also policymakers in the room. They were asking us, okay, now what's next? And the question is, obviously, we need to find ways to let people know how the technology works, but also try to understand what are the best ways to do so. And so here is what we try to do in this new work, which is, as I said, funded by the USDA NIFA program. And so we go back to the behavioral economics theory of framework and try to understand what do they do there and how we can apply their concepts within the agriculture and food space. So there's this beautiful paper published in 2020 saying that in Nature, and the paper basically says that if you don't know what is this, like this is a cup of coffee, right? But we don't know how it's made. We have no idea. So what do? We use cues to judge the quality of the cup of coffee, right? And so most of the time, what we do is we rely on trust. And there was also this presidential address yesterday or this morning, I lost the time here, where, you know, trust in science and trust in different entities is relevant, and we need to take this into account within, you know, the work we do. And then in addition to trust, right, which kind of works as a proxy or a cue of quality. So if I trust, I trust the source, I also trust the quality. And vice versa. So in addition to that, there is this incredible work by Kahan, I think he's at Yale, he's in the law school, and is a great behavioral scientist, which introduced this, what's the name, cultural credibility theory, which says it's another heuristic, right? So if we trust, right, our trust is based on many different factors, and those factors are about our prior beliefs and worldwide views, and also who delivers the information. So see, this is the framework, and so I think I'm almost out of time, but almost there. So what we do is we try to combine all of this work done by this guy here to understand what we can do to change behaviors of people, knowing that, first of all, the source of information matters and our prior beliefs matters. And so to do so, I will show you what we'll do. So we do a survey or an experiment where we capture prior knowledge and familiarity with the products. Then we capture this cultural predisposition, which is measured by a scale that they developed. And then, in addition to that, what we do is to expose people to different sources of information. And we do so by looking at the, our political views. So we have left and right political views, right? More like Democrat versus Republicans. And then we look at benefits and risks. So we have a 2x2 design. And now the nicest thing is we need to find who is going to deliver the information. So we went online and we found a website where you can create phases in different ways. And we did so, but then we said, okay, they're going to kill our paper because deception, right? Those people do not exist. So if we want to send this to an econ journal, they're going to kill our paper. So we were kind of arguing with Marco and Jason. So who is going to be our expert? And guess what? Jason is going to be our expert in the survey. And so we will show the picture. Then we will show basic information. And finally, we will show a video. I have a video of Jason. I'm not going to show you the video. I think you will read the paper and look at the video. And so after all of these 3 steps will be completed, basically we will run an experiment where we will ask people to make choices among different products and see whether, first of all, whether they know Jason, who he is, if they trust his face, if they eventually they don't know him. But I think this is an interesting design, because in addition to that, now our next step will be this, and I think I'm out of time. It will be in the future also nice to look at how this theory can be used, for example, to analyze different perceptions depending on gender, race, and other demographics when delivering information. And thank you for your attention. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask
later, because we have 3 more presentations.
Sorry.
So our next presenter will be Dr. Fuller from the Tufts University.
You don't have to share anymore. Brendan, can you see it?
I can.
Oh, you're looking for the presenter view?
Yeah.
Just click that one.
So I was looking to like presenter view, how to do that? No.
I think go back out and go.
Sure.
I think you would only find it under the PowerPoint thing, you know, when you go in PowerPoint. Go up
Here?
to slideshow. Slideshow. See if that has presenter review.
I think start it from the beginning and then right click when you do it. Yeah, and then right click. And then the presenter.
Oh. No. Oh.
Yeah, this one, yeah.
I think, is it still shared?
You get to share it. Share screen. One more just come up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cancel it? Yeah. You can cancel it.
Okay, so today I'm presenting Cultivating the Right Image, Consumer Interest in Naming Conventions for Cellular Agriculture Products. This is a shared research with Larissa Drescher from C3 team, Caroline Andrews, Clara Cho, and Sean Cash, who's here in case I don't know how to answer a question. Okay, so a little bit of background of cellular agriculture. So food production must rise to 70 to 100% as world population increase, which is estimated to be 10 billion by 2050. And these plus other problems of limited agricultural water and land, water scarcity, increased greenhouse gas emissions, and natural disasters due to climate change is asking for a change. And cellular agriculture is one way to solve some of these problems. So a little bit of what cellular agriculture, some of you already know what it is, but this is a new kind of technology to produce meat from cells. And so there's no animal that is killed in the process of producing beef or a burger. So this is, I'm not going to try to explain how meat from cells come, but what scientists basically do is that they take, in this case, cows' stem cells and muscle cells and some organs, and then they put that in Petri dishes, and then they put amino acids and carbohydrates, and then it just come like voila, there's a steak and there's burger. And so this is very simplified, like the real thing. So now that this product is coming to the market and is coming soon, we're interested in what can these products be called. There are many companies interested in or developing or improving their prototypes and creating like very many advances in these topics. So we need to know how to call these products. So in 2019, the USDA asked the public for names regarding these products. So like what names would these products have and what names would be misleading for consumers. And these are just a couple of examples of the comments that they received. This is one of the Oklahoma Cattlemen Association that want to call these products lab grown or artificially grown produced meat. And they said that these should be clear and equal in font as the term the product is trying to imitate, such as meat or burger or steak. And from another point of view, Blue Nalu, that's a company producing cultured fish. They said that they like the term cell culture because it's very appropriate, and they all agree that that is a good name. But there were other comments and terms such as man-made meat, slaughter-free meat, kill-free meat, and there are many others as well. So Tufts University received a 5-year, $10 million grant to develop cultivated meat. And there is a group of scientists from diverse disciplines investigating cultivated meat. So these lead to the creation of TACA, the Tufts University Center for Cellular Agriculture, where they focus on these 4 fronts: research, outreach, resources, and education, trying to bring students and faculty from the different disciplines and different universities too to come together and develop a place where cellular agriculture is the basis. So research questions are consumers willing to pay for meat grown from cells, from cell products to support production at a commercial scale? And does the name for meat grown from cells impact consumers' probability of choice and willingness to pay? To solve these questions, or try to, we developed a survey in a choice experiment. It's a hypothetical discrete choice experiment with 4 treatments where we are, so these are the 4 treatments. One is lab grown meat versus conventional, and so on with the other 3 names: cellular meat, cultivated meat, and culture meat. We are also testing consumer preferences for meat grown from cell names. So we have a couple of names like clean meat, climate meat, and we're asking participants to select the 3 ones that they like the most and the 3 ones that they like the least. And also we are identifying participants' profile. So we have a survey of food technology neophilia, scientific literacy, and perceived consumer effectiveness. And we gather also sociodemographic information. So this is the experimental design. I have to warn you, we don't have results yet. So I am presenting the design and like the plans that we have. But this is a label experiment. We use 3 products. We use a burger, hot dogs, and chicken nuggets. And we are included in our design 2 attributes: price and production method. And the production method will be the name that we're using. And we have an opt-out option. And then for the data collection, we're using Qualtrics. We have a sample of 800 participants in the US, 800 participants in Germany, and it will take about 15 minutes. We are as I mentioned, in the pre-testing stage. We started last week, and this week we are continuing with pre-testing of the survey, so that's exciting. And that's all. Any questions? I also put here the website for TACA if you are interested in knowing more about this.
So we don't have time for questions. Maybe we can ask you later. Yeah.
We have 2 more presenters and want to make sure you all get in time for the next session.
So next presenter is Kathy.
Does anyone know how to? I don't think that's gonna change it, is it?
What you have to do is to, where is it?
Oh, this one here, right? Thank you. No, I did not. So I need to do that real quick and then I will.
You can just share the password.
The screen? Okay. Okay, thank you for having me. My name is Katie Harris-Lagudakis. I'm an assistant professor at Iowa State. This is joint work with Jibo Wan, who is doing a postdoc at MIT, and John Crespi, who is also at Iowa State. So this paper is about price labeling regulations, and we're hoping to estimate consumer welfare, and we're gonna be looking at the tuna industry. So the focus of this paper is about information disclosure over the price per unit. And this is slightly different from like other labeling literature in the sense that like a consumer can easily calculate the price per unit. They can look at the price of a can of tuna, see how many ounces it is, and then calculate the price per ounce. In the US, we have different labeling regulations across different states. So 34 states have no regulation on price per unit disclosure. 6 states have voluntary regulation laws, which basically means that they regulate if you are going to show it, how you calculate the price per unit. So is it going to be price per ounce, or is it going to be some other measure of price per unit? Some states are in a voluntary strict regime. One state, California, and they have regulation on the specific formatting of that price label, the color, the font size, etc. 4 states have mandatory disclosure, and then 5 states have mandatory strict disclosure, which means it's mandatory and it has to look this certain way when you do disclose it. So we're going to kind of pair this variation with a collusive effort in the tuna industry, which basically, as you guys know, there's not that many people in the canned tuna space. They all got together and they said, let's change the standard size of our cans from 6 ounces to 5 ounces. And so they made this agreement in August 2008. We read legal documents to confirm that in fact they have been prosecuted for this. And so there's a lot of reports on when they actually agreed to make this switch. So within a year from August 2008, 5 ounce is the predominant can size for tuna in the US. So this is just showing you the variation in labeling regulations. The gray states are the states that don't have any laws concerning this. Green states are the ones that it's voluntary. So if you are going to post it, you need to calculate it a certain way. California is kind of special. And then our mandatory regulation states end up being on the coasts here. So and then this is then showing you the change in the size of tuna cans. The vertical line is August of 2008. So you can see that there were 3 brands that were pretty consistently selling 6 ounce cans of tuna. After August 2008, that begins to drop off fairly steeply. We have 2 brands, this teal line in the middle, they were kind of mixed. Half of the cans were 6 ounces that they were selling, the other half were 5. So when you take the average, and then we had another brand, I can't say the names, but they were predominantly in the 5 ounce space before they agreed to kind of change their can sizes to be smaller. So we are using Nielsen retail scanner data, and we're looking at the store level data, and we're focusing on single can tuna only. We might expand this to kind of include multi-packets of tuna, but we just kind of wanted to flesh out what we were doing. The other thing I will say is that what we're doing with this data is we are looking for the first instance at the store level that you are selling a 5 ounce can of tuna among these 3 brands that we're primarily doing 6 ounces. So like the rollout of new tuna coming into stores, it doesn't happen at all stores at the same time. So we're generating a store specific date of the first time that they sold a 5 ounce can of tuna of these 3 brands that used to be doing 6 ounces. So kind of different states, different time periods, getting these new cans of tuna, which are smaller. And so our empirical approach, we're estimating a really simple linearized budget model where we're going to look at the share of cans sold in store S for brand J on week T. We're going to include brand store as well as month fixed effects to try and absorb a lot of that heterogeneity across geographic locations. We're calculating the price per can as well as the price per ounce, and we are interacting that price per ounce term with whether or not that store is located in a state that has disclosure regulations. And we'll do that in various ways. So one is just, do you have any regulation at all? Are you a voluntary regulation? Are you a mandatory regulation? For identification, we're going to use Hausman instruments for prices, instrument that everybody loves to hate, but everybody uses. And then we're going to assume that can size is exogenous due to this collusive effort. So we're assuming it has nothing to do with the consumer. It's all coming from the supply side. And so the size of the can we're taking as exogenous. One thing to note here, which is kind of interesting and cool. So the only reason that we can identify beta 2 and beta 3 separately from beta 1 is due to the fact that the can size is in fact decreasing over time. And then I'm gonna skip straight to the willingness to pay estimates and not kind of bore you with these other parameter estimates. So when we calculate the willingness to pay, we find that when you're in a state that has any type of disclosure regulation, that these consumers are willing to pay 33 cents less for the same can of tuna relative to people in states that don't have any regulation laws. This varies by whether or not you kind of split it out by voluntary, mandatory strict. And so we find that consumers are willing to pay 20 to 40 cents less when they're located in these states that have disclosure regulations for the same can of tuna. Kind of makes sense. This is about a 20% difference in the pre-average price of tuna, and the amount of tuna that you're getting is decreasing by about 16%. So kind of seems to check out there. So ongoing work, this is what Jibo's been working on a lot. What we're trying to do is calculate the welfare loss due to collusion in places with regulation and without regulation in order to back out the effect of regulation on consumer welfare. So you can think about the welfare loss of this collusive agreement, given that you had this information versus if you didn't have that information, and that difference should tell us what is the value of having these regulations on price per ounce or on price per unit labeling. So thank you for the opportunity to present this work. We are very much working on it, so we are looking forward to your thoughts, feedback, and questions. Thank you again.
Kathy, and I think maybe we don't have time for questions.
Okay.
If you have questions, maybe we can ask them later. Then we have the last presentation, which is a room presentation. So let me make sure I stop the share and also giving.
Yeah.
Oops. Yes. Yeah. So the last presentation is Dr. Brandon McFadden from Delaware.
Thank you. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, well, this is a work done by a student who just finished here at Delaware. His name is Pius Collassi, and this work is with two colleagues at University of Delaware, Kelly Davidson and Leah Palm Forster. And would like to give a shout out to two alums who graciously funded this study, Jim and Marcia Burrell. So quick motivation, hidden hunger is used to describe micronutrient malnutrition, and that's what we're going to focus on today. And we're going to focus on 4 micronutrients specifically: iron, vitamin A, zinc, and iodine. And of course, these deficiencies lead to negative health outcomes. Further aggravating these negative health outcomes is it's often the case, particularly for pregnant women, that they might suffer from multiple deficiencies. So the at-risk groups are women of reproductive age, and this is focused, this data and what I'm presenting today is focused on Tanzania, okay, just so you know. So women of reproductive age, that's 18 to 49, is how it's typically classified by health organizations, and children under the age of 5. So this figure on the right, you can see that about 50% of women and children under the age of 5 are anemic, okay, and then this figure on the left shows you kind of the impact of being in a high poverty household. The chronic malnutrition on the left in the study is really stunting. So it's stunting of children under the age of 5. You can see high poverty households are much more likely to have children suffering from stunting. So Tanzania has established some biofortified guidelines. And so, I've kind of told you about the micronutrients we're going to focus on. And specifically today, this talk, we're going to talk about these biofortified foods, particularly the ones that have been developed by Harvest Plus, which are bred conventionally. These aren't GMOs or gene edited crops. Okay. And so you can get an idea over here that there are several for maize, iron, and zinc. And biofortification, just so you know, can occur a couple of different ways. One is industrial fortification. So example of that is like iodized salt. And then it can also come from crop improvements, okay, which just involves selecting traits kind of for consumer benefits, right, instead of to benefit the producer. Currently, the iron beans, vitamin A maize, and sweet potatoes are available in Tanzania. Okay, so our objective is going to be, for today's talk, is going to be to determine the inherent communication value of branding crops. Like I just showed you that figure from Harvest Plus, right? They say iron beans, not just biofortified beans. So the data was collected online from residents of Tanzania. The target subpopulation were females of reproductive age. And total, we got 1,029 observations. 806 were female, 223 were male. So we oversampled females because that was the group we were interested in, but we still wanted to collect some males to have a reference group. Also, the survey was translated into Swahili, so respondents could choose either language when completing the survey. So what we did here is we're asking separate questions for each of those micronutrients: iron, vitamin A, zinc, and iodine, okay? And specifically, we're asking which foods reduce the risk of those micronutrient deficiencies. All right, and so, and we're interested in these biofortified crops specifically. Okay, so response options were for included others, and I'll show you an example. I'll show you a table in a second to show you all the response options that were available. But specifically, we're interested in these 2 crops for iron, the 3 for vitamin A, and then the 3 for zinc. So here, this table shows you the overall selection of these that respondents chose, and these foods were all that were listed as response options. These response options were held constant across every question for every micronutrient. Okay, so you can see, and I've got boxed here, the relevant foods and what you're going to see in a minute with estimation. And so you can see that we have a pretty decent overall selection of these foods. Now, you'll see the biofortified crops, like for the iron beans, we have biofortified and then iron, the parentheses, beans. And that's because, of course, we've got some randomized groups going on, right, to identify some effects. And so some groups saw response options that said biofortified beans, and, all the rest of the options were biofortified. Another, other groups saw the specific name, this branding that Harvest Plus uses, where they include the micronutrient name in the food, okay? And you can see, too, there was a decent selection for fortified salt for iodine. So let's talk a little bit more about these randomized groups. And check my time real quick so I don't keep you late. Okay, so the randomized groups varied by presentation of information and information intervention, okay? And that would list the foods that would reduce the risk. One quick note is no information was provided for iodine. I'll explain a little bit why this a little bit more when I get to the results, okay? And some respondents were shown the branded response options when asked the question, okay? So for instance, those in the control, this first group, they saw no information, and their response options were all those biofortified crops, okay? It didn't say iron beans, it said biofortified beans. Those in the branded no information, their response options had the branded, right, like iron beans, but they didn't see any information saying, these iron beans reduce the risk of being deficient in iron. The information no branded, they received information, but even in the information, it just said biofortified beans, and then the response option also said biofortified beans, okay? So there's no branding in those groups. And then lastly, we have both branded and information. So that group got information in their information treatment, just like they saw the branded options in the information. So it would say iron beans, and then the response option, also iron beans, okay? So the hypotheses here are that all other groups select more of the biofortified crops in the control. It's not clear if this branding will be more effective than the information. Okay, and so likely that both branded and information that last group performed the best. So this shows you the selection of those biofortified foods, and we're, I've got iodine in here as a control. Like I said, no information for iodine, okay? So if you recall, there were 2 risk-reducing foods, 2 biofortified crops for iron, 3 for vitamin A, 3 for zinc. Okay, and this is just kind of the raw data across these groups. So, just looking at the raw data, it looks like branding has some inherent communication effect. And it appears that there's low awareness about the foods, right? Even in the branded group, you have people who are provided information, but not branded response options, performing a little bit better. And then it looks like combining both is the most effective. And so no information was provided for iodine recall, but nevertheless, people were pretty familiar on average with iodized salt. Not surprising, been around for a while, quite a bit of awareness about that. So now I'm going to look at these at-risk populations that I was interested in while controlling for these group effects, right? So interested in relative performance of females in high poverty households. You might be saying, Brandon, why are you saying high poverty, not low income? It's because we're not using just stated income as a measure. We're using the Tanzania Poverty Scorecard. This is a set of questions, like 10 questions that tries to measure poverty better than just stated income. Questions like how many children are in the household, what is your source of power, things like that. So we can see that overall females on average perform better than males at selecting these foods, but high poverty households performed worse. Post estimation with some wall tests, we find that indeed the branded crops and information performed the best, then branded crops, then just information, no branded crops, then the branded crops, of those who received some kind of group information or branded responses perform the worst. Okay. Now, if we look over here at iodine, we see that there are no significant estimated group effects. Remember, there's no information for iodine, so this gives us some confidence that an internal validity of these group effects, and that those group effects that we are picking up for iron, vitamin A, and zinc aren't just some random artifact. And so there are the conclusions. I'm out of time. Thank you. I hope you all enjoyed the conference. My flight got canceled, so I'm at home.
We have 2 minutes for questions. Any questions?
For anybody.
For anybody.
I just had a descriptive question, Katie, from I assume like you can think of immediately before and after the can size change of the tuna. I assume the unit price went up. Well,
Yeah.
did the package price stay the same or did it go down slightly?
So the unit price went up and the price per can also increased slightly. So it really was like, I think it was like a 20% increase in the price per ounce and about like a 7% increase.
So did they really have a price increase at the same time as the size?
Yes, yeah. So we like spent like a long time trying to think about how to like disentangle those. And I was still thinking about that even more. But yeah, so.
Do they have any other label changes, like label design changes to somehow position it as maybe a higher class product if they're actually?
No, so it's kind of funny, like when we started working on this project and I started looking at the data, I was talking with John and I was like, they colluded, but I feel like they did it in the worst way possible. Like they weren't successful in it. And they later, like outside, so we've like kind of put our data to protect us from this, but they later started colluding on whether or not they were gonna put the dolphin protection label on their thing. But that's outside of the time frame of the data, so we're trying to stay away from that. So yeah, I don't think it helped them. I think what happened was consumers started going towards the private label brands.
It shouldn't help them. It's deceptive. I just want you to know, I
Yeah,
started my
yeah.
career with this unit
But
pricing
they were
thing.
attempting to, get more money for less tuna, right? And I think that consumers like it didn't work. It backfired on them. And
But
now,
only when you have that regulation of unit pricing, right?
I think still in the control groups as well. And I think the other thing we found out too is that there are some retail locations where there's only one brand of tuna on the shelf. And in that situation, the labeling doesn't really help you because there's no comparison. Like if you're gonna get tuna, like there's only one option and you're not comparing the price per ounce of this tuna compared to that tuna. So yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
You just see our folder with the. Sure. And try to count them with that. So they're-
I know.
like-
Depends on where he's
what they do
going.
is
I
so
know.
simple.
I know.
You might
Yeah.
say, smarter when you will, consumers are dumb, but they're not ignorant, like, you know, so typically like charts and. Yeah.
And I love that also, like,